secretly disposing of his body. And so, again, we see God will supernaturally intervene with the departure of these two witnesses, even as he did with Moses and Elijah. But again, the text does not specifically identify them, so we cannot be dogmatic, but only speculate on who these men might be. Now, we learn more about their magnificent ministry in verse 5. We read that if anyone desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone would desire to harm them in this manner, he must be killed. By implication, many will desire to harm them. Imagine the deception you and I would have if we went into Iran or Saudi Arabia or North Korea or, frankly, some of the places here in the United States, and boldly stood up and said, "Thus saith the Lord." You would be killed within a matter of minutes. Well, this will be much, much worse during the time of the tribulation. Because again, by now, the people of the earth have experienced devastating plagues. They have already cried out for the mountains and the rocks to fall on them and to hide them from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come. Revelation 6, verses 16 and 17. So by now, the people of the world have rallied behind their new Messiah, the Antichrist. They're mindlessly believing his lies. They are worshiping him, and they have a violent hatred, more so than ever in the history of the world, against the God of the Bible. In fact, their disdain for anyone who would dare say to them that you are a sinner in need of saving grace will be eclipsed only by their utter contempt for the God who offers it. So these preachers will need to be able to protect themselves. Sometimes I must confess, I wish I had that power, as many others would like as well. Because as these enemies will attack them, we read that fire will come from their mouth and devour them. Literally in the Greek, it means consume them. They will be incinerated. And of course, this will only add fuel to the world's rage. As I meditated upon this, I thought, so much for being seeker-sensitive and trying to accommodate the culture. Beloved, again, the notion that we as Christians should conform to the culture versus confront it is absolutely ludicrous. It is patently false. It is unbiblical. A preacher must either choose to be faithful or popular. He cannot be both. Then, being even less seeker-sensitive, in verse 6, these have the power to shut up the sky in order that rain may not fall during the days of their prophesying. Again, that will be the final 3.5 years. And they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with every plague as often as they desire. Now, folks, keep in mind, this is so amazing. Remember that the plague of the third trumpet poisoned 1/3 of the earth's fresh water. And now, during this last half of the tribulation, there's not going to be any rain. This will be unimaginably catastrophic. Life on the planet will begin to grind to a halt. And the world will know that this is all because of these invincible and indefatigable preachers who serve the creator, triune God of the Bible that we hate. How ironic. Down through history, people have scoffed at preachers that preach the Word of God, and they've killed them. I think of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 1:20, has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? And he goes on to say, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached. Foolishness is morano. We get our word moron from that. They see us as morons. But God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. We preach Christ crucified. To Jews a stumbling block, and to Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are the called, both Jews and Greeks, It is Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. So we've seen their magnificent ministry. Notice, secondly, their morbid death in verse 7. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome them and kill them. Now, this is the first time that we are introduced to the beast in the apocalypse. The beast, to therion in Greek, it is a term describing a vicious carnivore. It describes a beast of prey, like a lion or like a tiger. And it has within it the emphasis of a ravenous carnivore with a ravenous appetite that functions solely on the basis of his instinctively cruel and violent nature. This is a reference now to the Antichrist, who will be called the beast 36 times in the book of Revelation. And we will study this in detail in chapters 13 as well as 17. Now notice that he comes up out of the abyss. The term abyss is mentioned 7 times in Revelation. And as you will recall, when we studied it before in chapter 9 in the context of the 5th trumpet, that this refers to a mysterious subterranean cavern on earth that extends into the bowels of the earth through some kind of a shaft that God has sealed shut for the purpose of incarcerating the very worst of the worst of vile demons. Now, this is not Satan. Satan is represented by a dragon in Revelation, but rather a man, and we will see more of this as time goes on, a man who is empowered by the demonic forces that come out from this abyss. So we learn that after the divinely decreed duration of the ministry here for the 2 witnesses, God allows the Antichrist to finally overcome them and kill them, to the utter jubilation of the world. In verse 8 we read, "And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified." Obviously, this is a reference to Jerusalem, which will be the primary staging area of their ministry. But also, we know that this will be the headquarters of the Antichrist, as we read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. And now this is a city that is so infected with every imaginable form of wickedness that we see it is likened to ancient Sodom, as well as the original enemy of Israel, the nation of Egypt. The figurative likeness of these 2 places underscores the loathsome depths to which the holy city has now fallen. This is such a macabre, ghoulish, fiendish scene. Notice, "And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city." Dear friends, the greatest indignity that can be perpetrated upon an enemy is to leave his body unburied in a public place and watch it slowly decompose. And think about this. At this time, this will be politically correct. This will be morally appropriate. My, how civilized we have become over the years. How sophisticated and moral we are. Yes, indeed, the world is getting better.